In a deeply unsettling development on Monday, an Illinois man, Robert E. Crimo III, 24, pleaded guilty to a shooting spree that shocked the nation on July 4, 2022, when he opened fire on a peaceful Independence Day parade in the suburban city of Highland Park, Illinois, located roughly 30 miles north of Chicago. This decision came mere moments before opening statements were set to begin in his trial on charges of murder and attempted murder, marking an unexpected and highly emotional turn in what had been an anticipated and high-profile case, as the courtroom, filled with a mix of survivors, families of the victims, and media, Crimo, who had initially pleaded not guilty to the charges, made the shocking move to withdraw his plea. His admission of guilt in the fatal shooting of 7 innocent people and the wounding of dozens more has sparked a wave of mixed emotions in the community. A mix of relief, frustration, anger, and grief washed over the room as Crimo's decision unfolded before the eyes of those who had been eagerly waiting for justice to be served. The shooting that shook a community. The tragedy that led to these court proceedings occurred on July 4, 2022, when Crimo, perched on a rooftop along the parade route, opened fire into the unsuspecting crowd. The victims, ranging in age from the elderly to young children, were enjoying the festivities when the horrific event unfolded. The sight of Crimo firing indiscriminately into the crowd left a community shattered and grieving. Witnesses recalled the panic and chaos that ensued, with families scrambling for safety, some of them leaving behind chairs, strollers, and belongings as they fled for their lives. Authorities confirmed that Crimo used a semi-automatic rifle to carry out the attack, a weapon he legally obtained, despite various warnings and red flags about his mental stability and history of violent behavior. The shooting spree left a deep and permanent scar on the tight-knit Highland Park community. The aftermath was filled with shock, disbelief, and anger as families grappled with the senseless loss of loved ones and the deep trauma experienced by survivors. Legal proceedings and Crimo's guilty plea in the courtroom. Crimo sat beside his attorneys, his face stoic, as Judge Victoria Rossetti presided over the proceedings. Crimo, who had previously expressed intentions to represent himself in court, seemed passive and disinterested, offering little more than brief one-word answers to the judge's questions. As Judge Rossetti carefully outlined the charges to Crimo, asking if he understood the gravity of the situation, Crimo responded with a terse yes. The plea hearing was a significant and unexpected moment in a legal process that had been marked by uncertainty. Prior to this, Crimo had appeared erratic, often refusing to leave his jail cell for court hearings, and had caused delays by firing his public defenders. He had even expressed an intention to change his plea at various points during the trial's slow build-up. Despite such unpredictable behavior, Crimo's decision to plead guilty was ultimately accepted by the judge, ensuring that there would be no trial and no further motions in the case. It was a stark contrast to the high expectations that had surrounded his trial, which was anticipated to last for weeks. Victims and survivors speak out following the court proceedings. The community survivors, their families, and legal representatives gave statements that reflected the mixed emotions brought on by Crimo's guilty plea. Many expressed a sense of relief, feeling that the long road to justice was finally coming to an end, while others voiced their anger and frustration at the pain that had been inflicted upon them. Ashby Beasley, who had attended the parade with her young son and had narrowly escaped the shooting without injury, spoke with emotion as she reflected on the emotional toll the tragedy had taken on her and her family. Every single time I see him, it's stressful. It's upsetting for everyone in our community, she said, adding that the years-long wait for closure had been an agonizing experience for Beasley and countless others. The process of healing from the trauma inflicted on that fateful day would be a long and difficult one. Meanwhile, a spokeswoman from the law firm Romanucci and Blandon, representing dozens of survivors in a lawsuit, said that the survivors were focused on seeking civil justice. Many survivors and their families have filed lawsuits against the manufacturers of the rifle used in the attack, as well as against authorities, whom they accuse of negligence in allowing Crimo to legally obtain the weapon despite prior warnings. A spokeswoman for the law firm noted that while there was relief that Crimo had pleaded guilty, it was also an emotional day for many of the survivors. They have all gone home to process, she said, explaining that the survivors were asking for some time and space to come to terms with the events of that day. The plea change, she acknowledged, was only one step in the lengthy process of both legal and emotional recovery for those affected by the shooting. The legal fallout, in addition to the devastating impact on the victims and their families. The shooting had far-reaching consequences for the community and local officials. The shooting raised significant questions about gun control, mental health, and the ability of individuals to legally obtain weapons that are designed for mass destruction. While the gunman's actions were the ultimate tragedy, the legal and political aftermath of the attack has also sparked important discussions on a national level about how to prevent future tragedies. The Lake County State's Attorney, Eric E. Reinhardt, who had been closely involved in the case, expressed his shock and frustration at the senselessness of Crimo's actions. After the hearing, Reinhardt made it clear that the legal team had been fully prepared to go to trial, and that the guilty plea offered no concession on the part of the prosecution. Our community may never heal from the defendant's calculated and heinous actions that destroyed so many lives, Reinhardt said, reflecting the deep and abiding anger felt by the prosecution and the victims alike. Crimo's sentencing and the path forward. With the guilty plea in place, the next step in the legal process will be Crimo's sentencing. While the guilty plea has spared survivors and the broader community the agony of a lengthy trial, the sentencing will likely bring its own painful moments, as families and victims are given the opportunity to confront Crimo directly in court. Sentencing is scheduled for April 23rd, and Crimo is expected to spend the rest of his life in prison, without the possibility of parole. Each count of first-degree murder carries a maximum sentence of life in prison, and with 7 murder charges against him, Crimo's future appears bleak. The trial was expected to last around a month, and many had been preparing for the emotional toll that the trial would take. In the end, however, the guilty plea meant that the survivors and families of the victims would not have to endure the anguish of a protracted legal battle. While it provided some relief, it was evident that the deep scars left by the shooting would not heal quickly, and that the emotional impact of Crimo's actions would be felt for years to come. The impact on Highland Park. For Highland Park, the shooting and subsequent trial have had a profound impact on the entire community. The close-knit nature of the community, which is situated along the picturesque shores of Lake Michigan, made the tragedy even more devastating. Residents have struggled with the horror of the attack, and the emotional scars of the event will likely be felt for generations. In 2023, city leaders cancelled the usual July 4th parade in the wake of the shooting, opting for a more subdued community walk instead. The parade returned the following year, but the route was changed, and a memorial was set up to honor the victims Highland Park Mayor Nancy Rotring expressed her relief at the guilty plea, calling it an important step toward justice. "Our thoughts and hearts remain with the families whose loved ones were senselessly taken," she said, emphasizing that the plea did not erase the grief felt by those who had lost so much. The town's leadership has continued to offer support to the victims and their families, even as they struggle to come to terms with the aftermath of the shooting. As the legal process continues to unfold, it is clear that the wounds left by this senseless act of violence will take much longer to heal. For the survivors, their families, and the broader community, the path forward will be one of mourning, rebuilding, and finding ways to move forward, despite the unimaginable loss they have suffered.